Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. And as everybody talks about Israel and Iran and all that stuff on the horizon, there is a catastrophic defeat facing NATO. And the question is, how's NATO, and by NATO we mean the U.S. empire, going to deal with it? Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, hanging out with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. And everybody seems to have forgotten about the big conflict. And this is a huge one because the United States started this attempt to hold on to some kind of hegemony, I guess, in their mind by utilizing the Ukraine project. And we're going to use that to take Russia out. Well, that didn't work out so well. But here's the reality of that. Rather than just an unending conflict, the nature of war is at some point wars end, and this one appears to be headed towards its end. We can't say it's going to be a month from now, for 6 months from now, but we can say Ukraine ain't winning, and it ain't going to be pretty, and that's a very dangerous situation. Jim Kavanaugh, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. Look, Ukraine was never going to defeat Russia on its own. The Ukrainians who got into this, the right-wing fascist Ukrainians who wanted a war with Russia, knew very well from the beginning that their purpose was to get the United States involved in the war and to create a war with Russia. To some extent, the Ukrainian fascists are as nonchalant about Ukrainian lives as the Americans are. In other words, the Ukrainian fascists were really in their purpose to a large extent was to do away with Russia, to get regime change in Russia. And anyway, so the balance of power is there. The balance of forces is clear in the region. The Americans and the Western Europeans thought that the sanctions from hell, as they call them, would create a crisis that would make the oligarchs overthrow Putin and have a regime change in Russia, and Russia would get out of the way, and Ukraine would be a NATO stand state, and that would be that. And that didn't work out that way. Russia is much more powerful militarily, first of all, than the United States thought. Secondly, and even more importantly, to a certain extent, Putin and what he represents is more powerful politically in Russia than the Americans thought. You know, people just don't realize the extent to which the insult and the injury the Americans did in the Yeltsin era, in the post-Soviet era, and Russians are furious about that, and they don't want any part of that kind of Western neoliberalism. And Putin has restored a kind of national dignity and a national integrity that the vast majority of Russians support. And in the context of, after his incursion in February 2022, look, he didn't put enough troops in there to win, but the war was over. Ukraine they had a peace deal. Zelensky was willing to sign a peace deal with the Russians. The Russians were willing to sign a peace deal. They had terms initialed. And the Americans and British came in and told Zelensky, and I got to say, I got to have sympathy for Zelensky. They told Zelensky, you sign this peace deal and we're going to punish you. If you don't sign this peace deal, we're going to back you up. We'll give you everything you need to win this war. So here's Zelensky sitting around 3 years later saying, where's everything I need to win this war? They can't give him everything they need because they can't give him enough, because the Russians reorganized industrially. They created really a new military industrial complex to win this war. And they were able to do it because they have the resources and the legacy of Soviet planning, et cetera. And they have industrial resources. And they've created a situation where their economy didn't dissolve. In fact, it's better off. The European economies are the ones that are hurt by this. We blow up Nord Stream. We isolate. You're not isolating Russia. You're isolating yourselves from the largest country on earth and with enormous resources that you need. And so for 3 years, the Russians have built up their military industrial capacity. They now far outstrip Ukraine. There's no question about it. It's been a war of attrition. Russia is going to win a war of attrition. It's got more population, it's got a bigger military, and it's got a bigger military industrial capacity than Ukraine has. And Europe, then Europe has, then Western Europe has, then NATO has. In that theater, certainly, Russia was not going to be defeated, and it is not going to be defeated. So, it's been slow going. I've learned an awful lot from watching this war proceed. And the great slogan, which is true, is that, amateurs pay attention to tactics and professionals pay attention to logistics. This war has been about cutting down the supply lines, surrounding towns gradually, cutting out the logistical supplies and making it impossible for them to resist the final siege. So it's been a long time, but we're getting to a point now in the war where, and the American public, and therefore Donald Trump, we're tired of sending money to Ukraine. They're tired of these forever wars. And, Trump came in saying, I don't want part of it. This is Biden's war, etc. So he was able to play on that politically, and he's got himself stuck in that. Now, so you're at this stage, but the Americans and Europeans for 3.5 years have been saying this is an existential conflict for us. Head of the European Union, the head of NATO. We cannot lose this war to Russia. This will be a huge, and it's true. This is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is a war between NATO and Russia, between the possibility of NATO expanding into a aggressive posture against Russia on its southern border, or NATO being forced to retreat. That's what it is. This is a retreat. If Ukraine loses, if Russia wins, that it's a victory over NATO. This has been NATO has supplied all the arms and a lot of the people, in fact, for this war. So this is going to be a defeat of NATO, and it's coming. You've got to. Those of us who pay kind of attention to this every day and, watch Military Summary and listen to Alexander Mercouris, et cetera, you see how this is progressing. It's a hard fought slog. Okay. But even, and the Americans and Europeans have been trying to avoid acknowledging how bad it is for them. But even now, Foreign Affairs just did a thing saying Ukraine has no more than 6 months left. The army will collapse after 6 months if they don't get a huge infusion of new weapons. And it's not just weapons, though. They have a manpower problem. They can't solve these problems. So it's going to happen. They're advancing steadily, and they can't be pushed. The Russians are advancing steadily. They cannot be pushed back. Everybody sees that in the next few months there are going to be major victories for Russia. The fear is, from the Western side, a lot of people are saying this, and I think it may be the accurate way of saying this. The straw that will break the camel's back is Odessa. There's going to probably be a fight over Odessa, and a lot of people, the Russians want to take Odessa. They should take Odessa. That's a big push within Russia, and but now they're taking over a lot of the Sumy region as a buffer zone, at least. I think as of yesterday or today, they have taken the whole of the Lugansk Oblast, except for maybe certain pockets in forests, etc. And they're moving very strongly now in Zaporozhye, and certainly the next reason they're moving on a lot of fronts very well. And Pogrovsk, I don't quite even know how to say it, but
I can never pronounce half of those towns, so don't feel bad.
Steadily. So this is what the Americans and Europeans are going to be faced with. NATO is going to be faced with soon. That is, whether to accept defeat or to do what? What can they do? And I always said from the beginning of this, that's going to be the situation. One side or another is going to win. One side or another is going to be in a situation where they're facing defeat, and they're going to have to decide whether they will accept that defeat, and it will be an existential defeat. And it's very unlikely that it'll be Russia in that situation. And it's not. It's the NATO party is the party to the conflict that is facing an existential defeat. They do not have the conventional weapons to stop that, and their choice will be either to give up or to use tactical nuclear weapons. It was always the choice. The only party in the conflict that's capable that would think of using tactical nuclear weapons is the party that's losing the conventional war, and that was always going to be NATO. And NATO is going to be in that situation, and there's going to be soon, in historical terms, a decision that will have to be made whether to accept defeat or to use tactical nuclear weapons. I think the United States and Trump is in this position where it would be politically disastrous for him to do anything but to accept defeat at this point. I mean, he doesn't have. What are you going to do with conventional? Are you going to put in troops? You're going to put in what? He's given them every weapon they wanted, from tanks to F-16s to Patriot missile systems. What are you going to attack Russia directly? I mean, if you do that, I mean, that's going to be the alternative they have, either some kind of drastic escalation against Russia, which means either tactical nuclear weapons or what else, I don't know. And only the United States is capable of doing that, or accepting defeat. And it is bizarre, because this is, in terms of geopolitical weight, this is a much more important conflict for the hegemony of the Americans and the West on the whole global scale than is what's going on in Gaza or Israel, for example. But Zelensky, as I say, Zelensky is learning what it means to be a side piece. The Americans are always going to put Israel first. And Trump just got up and said, well, they want more. They want another Patriot system and for Ukraine. But, we have to have some for Israel. So this is the problem for Ukraine and for Zelensky now. They're a side piece. At the end of the day, Israel is the main squeeze. Americans, they're going to get everything that they need from the Americans. And the Americans are fighting on too many fronts. The Russians have one existential front, and that's Ukraine, and they're winning on it, and they're going to win on it. And I don't know how this is going to resolve. Let
me show you something, Jim. Here's an interesting bit of news. Putin and Macron talked for the first time in 3 years. Putin told Macron that the Ukraine conflict was a direct consequence of the policies pursued by Western states, which for many years ignored Russian security interests and established an anti-Russian bridgehead. He reiterated Moscow's approach to any settlement must be comprehensive, long-term, address the root causes of the crisis based on new territorial realities. Both countries share a special responsibility to maintain peace, as well as global nuclear proliferation. So they talked about apparently Iran. Macron is repeatedly we know that. Forget that about anyway. So the bottom line is this: it seems to me that as we have this discussion, we ain't the only ones that know the situation. That I think right now in this discussion, the Europeans know they're in a world of hurt. They know they're in deep trouble. They know Trump can't stand them. They know he hates Macron. They know that everything's going to Israel. They figured out, if he knows everything's going to Israel, nothing's going to Ukraine. That Ukraine gets zero. As you said, they're the side piece. Everything goes to the wife. The side piece don't get anything. The girlfriend or whatever, she's the one that the guy lives with. She's the one that's going to get a bill.
The main squeeze,
whatever you want to call us, right? And I think this is an indication. Your thoughts? Macron. And remember, Macron's, we've got to stand up against the Ruskies. We got to send troops. Starmer, come get over here. Let's send some troops. We got to break the Russians back. They're terrible. They're evil. Interesting turnabout. What do you make of Macron talking to Putin?
Well, throughout the Cold War, this is the crazy thing. The Americans and Russians talk to each other in the middle of the Vietnam War, in the middle, everything. Russian missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis. Americans and the Europeans, they talk to each other during this conflict. They demonized the Russians so much, and they demonized Putin so much they wouldn't even talk to him. So that's all breaking down now. You're going to have to talk to this guy. He's winning the game, and you got to talk to him. So this is a sign that that's breaking down to a certain extent. But Macron can't be trusted about anything. He'll try and play every angle. And again, what are they and the Europeans now have this division of old Europe and new Europe. The Baltic states. They're and who's the woman now? Callas, who's now the head of the
Kaja Callas. One of the I call them the Nazi princesses. Her and Bernd and Baerbock.
They're gung ho to still confront Russia. And Russia is saying what you quoted him saying to Macron. This is about a range of issues. Russia's going to go back. It's not Ukraine. It's about NATO. It's about the stance of NATO in the world vis-a-vis Russia. And Russia's going to go back to the kinds of proposals they made in December of 2021 before the invasion. And those are proposals about the entire security architecture of Europe and Russia. Okay. And they want missiles. They want first strike weapons out of Romania and Poland. They want, the Western Europe to recognize Russia and respect Russia, and not to treat it as an enemy that is in their sights to be defeated and broken up. That's a whole range of issues that are going to be put on the table by Russia. They can defeat Ukraine and get rid of the Zelensky regime and ultimately take over, 9/10 of the country, 3/4 of the country,
whatever they want.
But the fundamental problem won't be solved until there's a renegotiation of the European Eurasian world order with Russia and Europe and the United States. And you have this problem that the Europeans have. First of all, I said they have internal divisions. Old Europe, France and Germany and Italy, maybe
England, the same three,
come to terms with that. But you got the Baltic states that don't want to come to terms with Russia at all. Plus, you have now this bizarre situation of Trump in the United States versus the neocons, or is he and Trump really is a wild card. Who we are seeing now doesn't understand what he's doing. He's
you left something else before you come to Europe, Jim. And this is critical, I think. You got the Orban, you've got a growing coalition of Orban and Fico, which one's a conservative, one's an old school socialist / communist, right? Guy who loves the Soviet Union, but who are kind of nationalist. But meanwhile, Western Europe has to fight, whether it's Romania, Moldova. They're fighting because that coalition is growing because of people who are suffering, saying, hey, everyday working people saying, hey, we don't want all this crap. We want a peaceful resolution. So you've got a coalition that Western Europe has to fight to suppress to keep it from growing, who wants, I would argue, an economic alliance with Russia, because they're right on our border. They got all kinds of stuff. We can make money. We'd rather just make money with these people and live a better life. Then I think that coalition is critical and can't be overlooked. Absolutely.
Look, the German industry, they're being destroyed by this, by the loss of Russian energy, cheap Russian energy. Italy is getting ready to talking about pulling out of the EU. I mean, this has created crises, political and economic crises for Europe, much more than for Russia. Russia has consolidated itself economically and politically. Well, Europe is breaking up over this, and there are a number of different factions. You're absolutely right to point out the Fico Orban faction, and I think Italy is another weak link in the chain. And you have this crazy American president over here. Really, you never know what he's going to do from one minute to the next. The Europeans, on the one hand, have to kiss his ass because he's the big dog and they're the poodles. But on the other hand, their attempt to try and persuade him or, trick him into going along with them isn't working very well. It's not going to work. So they don't know what to do about that. Can they really go on their own? They can't do it. They don't have the power on their own to do anything anyway. And at the end of the day, they'll have to accept defeat in the face of Russia, the military defeat in Ukraine anyway. So this is an existential problem that's going to change the world in the way that it is changed. It's already changed the world. and they're just going to have to come to the point where they realize we're going to have to stop this foolish at this point, absolutely wasteful, to no point military fight in Ukraine. Stop that military fight, make the deal with Russia, the best deal that we can get. But what do they really care? Russia's going to be the dominant power in Ukraine as they were, and that'll be better for Ukraine at the end of the day. That was the whole damn thing that this started with Maidan. But Russia's going to be the dominant power in Ukraine. They're going to tame Ukraine and have Ukraine being a state which is absolutely non-threatening to it, and which they retain some kind of ultimate control over. And the Europeans are not going to be able to stop that.
Well, let me throw this at you, Jim. I do want to ask you about this. One of the things I think that's happening and that is particularly with Trump. The Biden administration was, they were the liberal fascists, in my opinion, and they align right up with the liberal fascists in Europe, right? Yay, we're liberals and we love the LGBT community and we love, diversity and all of these things. And by the way, we want lots of war, things like that. And you don't have any rights, censorship everywhere. Okay. Trump is an Orban type, so they hate Trump. The Europeans actually are learning that their cultural and other alliances aren't as tight with the US as they thought it was. And there's some enmity when let's just say this defeat happens and they got to face it, which to me is my guess, because their only other option is suicide. That's their option, suicide. You know what? We lost. Let's kill ourselves. That's their option. As soon as you throw a nuke at Russia,
it's like throwing yourself against a wall.
You're all going to die. So we can kill ourselves. We can do. That's an option. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that doesn't happen, and Europe is faced with this catastrophic defeat. I think it's the end of NATO. I think at that point, remember, NATO, we can dominate Russia. The argument was, we're going to protect you from Russia. Well, that's done with the Nord Stream and all of that. So now the argument is, realistically, the honest truth has come out. We're an organization that we will help you dominate, defeat Russia. We'll split it apart, and all of you guys will get your fair share of the loot. That's really what it was.
Yep.
Guess what? Yep. Now that's over. At that point, Europe doesn't need NATO. What the hell good is NATO to them? They ain't never getting their fair share of the loot. So anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only way they can get their fair share of loot is to make their own economic deals with Russia and have normal economic relations with Russia. But one of the things this demonstrates, NATO never was a defensive alliance. NATO, people don't realize it. NATO was formed before the Warsaw Pact was formed. NATO was formed. And the Warsaw Pact, which was the Soviet alliance in the Eastern European countries, was formed after NATO was formed. NATO was formed, and the first head of NATO was a Nazi. So from the Russian point of view, from the Soviet point of view at that point, which was correct, NATO was an offensive economic alliance designed to create offensive power that could be used against the Soviet Union. And it was a constant threat to the Soviet Union. So that's what it was for. And when the Soviet Union disintegrated and the Warsaw Pact disintegrated, did NATO go away? No, it didn't. It just became more aggressive and more assertive. The promise that they wouldn't move another inch east was forgotten completely, reneged on, and they took on every country up to the Soviet border that they could. And they have ambitions about joining NATO, extending into the Pacific, of the Southern Pacific. It's crazy. So NATO is, and always was, an aggressive military alliance designed to be the multinational instrument of the United States against what it considered its potential competitors, the Soviet Union, China, and even China, et cetera. So that's nothing to do with North Atlantic. I mean, that was initially right. It did, but it's really, it's the main tool of American imperialism. So that's, as you say, and it had a tremendous amount of military power. It did for most of its existence, but that's not the case anymore. And you have this situation. So NATO is obviously not capable of performing on this offensive mission. This was the test of it. Ukraine was the best NATO power on the planet and in Europe. And they said it. They said, the Ukrainian defense minister, and he was right at the outset of this, we have the best NATO army in Europe. And they did. And they got all the best weapons. And they got all the best help. And they got run by NATO and American commanders out of the base in Wiesbaden, Germany. Okay, so this whole thing was a NATO war. And they lost. They've lost this war to Russia, and they don't have any way of recuperating it. So as de facto, NATO has been destroyed, has been revealed to be a weak military alliance, and B is, as we've said and as you've said, there are internal dissensions in it now. There are internal differences. Oh, we got Sweden and we got Finland and we got isn't that nice? You got these people in. What are they doing for you? You know what I mean? You're going to lose Hungary. You're going to lose Czech Republic. You're going to lose Italy, maybe. And let's not forget, this was a military alliance. There is the economic and social problems of Europe that are underlying all this. The European populations are getting nothing from this except poverty, except austerity, etc. And they know this. And these European governments, are going to have to respond to their citizens in some way and reproduce what was a very successful social democratic order in Western Europe, and has been dissipated because once now they're going to cut everything. I mean, look what's going on in Britain. It's all about austerity and cutting, and we're going to build up 5%, 10% for defense spending. That's something the European countries, they don't need to do that. They don't want to do it. Why should the European populations don't want that? They want spending on social programs, and they want the kinds of life that they had for a while and that has been being destroyed by this offensive, this neoliberal economic offensive and the neoconservative attack on Russia, a neocon attack on Russia for some reason. Why can't we all just get along? I mean, really, Russia's a big country. They have a lot of things we need. We were buying energy from them. Now all of a sudden we can't. China's a big country. They have a lot of things we need. We got to have real serious, mutually respectful economic relations with these countries. That's what's going to be beneficial to them. And what's the role of NATO in that? Nothing. NATO was just an obstacle to that. And that's becoming clearer to people.
Well, you got to add this. I mean, certainly we're talking about Ukraine, but here's the other part. Look, the Afghan war was NATO. The Brits were there. The Australians were there. All of the usual suspects. French, so just you name it. Okay, Iran. Now, when the missiles were fired from Iran, you had the Persian Gulf, you had French, Italian, American ships that would try to take the missiles down. They go across Iraq, Syria, our bases to try to take them down. Towards the Red Sea, you had Brits and some others in the Red Seas. Then they crossed, right? And the missiles still got through, which says a lot about our air. Yeah. They hit like 4 or 5 different air defense zones and got through all of them. It smacked the crap out of Israel anyway, so our air defense systems are not good. Anyway, here's my point. That was NATO. To pretend that the U.S., the Germans, the British, the French, it was a NATO operation. And they got the crap. Because they couldn't come out from under their, cover and just say we're all fighting. They used, Israel out front. But they're defeated. They're defeated in the Middle East. They've been so far. Now the war's still going on. To date, they've been defeated, right? In their first go round. My point being, NATO's weak militarily everywhere. NATO, the biggest weakness of NATO, I think, is the fact that it's neoliberal and they've deindustrialized themselves and sent everything to, the global South, and that war is a military endeavor. But now it's obvious to them. They can look at it and say, we've only got X amount of weeks left of air defense. Well, if you can't do that, how are you going to do it in China? You don't have, if you got 20 days of air defense against Israel, you got 20 seconds air defense against China and Russia, realistically. So now they're in a bad position. But to me, NATO is not just a toothless tiger. It ain't even a picture of a tiger. It is militarily incoherent. You know what I mean? It's militarily weak. It's to me, when they face this, we're sitting there talking about what are they going to do when they face this cataclysmic defeat against Russia. There's only one thing I can guarantee about that, Jim. You know what that is? They don't have a plan.
Yeah,
I will guarantee you they have no clue, no plan, nothing.
Well, incoherent is exactly the right word. They're an incoherent organization. What's their purpose? And what is their plan beyond defeating Russia, which was the whole plan of that was at the outset, the sanctions from hell. We have so much economic power and so much military power that will create such a terrible economic and military situation for Russia that the Putin government will collapse and they'll be taken, the oligarchs will rebel or somebody will rebel. And that never happened. Even when Prigozhin rebelled, that lasted 10 days, 5 days, whatever, and so they think, again, this is partying like it's 1999 again. They think they have all this overwhelming, omnipotent power, and they think that their enemies, Russia and China, are these weaklings, these, the gas station with nuclear weapons, etc. This is not what's happening in the world anymore, and they can't get it through their heads. So, and what's happened in the European countries is that their whole social democratic frameworks have been dissolving and undermining themselves for the sake of austerity and neoliberalism and all kinds of reasons. And now they are fundamentally weak, and they don't have a purpose anymore. What's their purpose? To defeat Russia? To defeat China, as you say? I mean, it's lunacy. The idea that they can defeat China, lunacy, and people just don't realize the level at which China has succeeded and has surpassed in all kinds of ways the American, let's say, the American apparatus of the world, and the Euro-Atlantic apparatus. So this is something, but they still, the purpose of NATO at this point really is to blow things up and to try to intimidate people, the third party countries like Iran, the regional powers that are growing up and trying to leave the American imperialist world, really. They're trying to intimidate them with their ability to blow things, and they have the ability to destroy things, and it's a nuclear power, and they can try to intimidate, and they can successfully intimidate many people, many actors in the region, but that's their purpose now, to try and keep the American imperialist order together, and with intimidation and with conjunctural intimidation. We got to try and keep India on our side. We got to try and intimidate Iran. We got to try and stop Pakistan from moving too close to China and from moving too close to Iran. We got to try and intimidate all these. We got to get Sweden and Finland and into NATO, and keep them in NATO. And we got to do this and we got to do that. That's all. But as you say, there's no coherence to that. And there's no real plan. There's nothing they can do except intimidate, try to intimidate again. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do with Iran. They're trying to intimidate Iran into surrendering on the basis of, we're going to blow the crap out of you if you don't. And,
Iran ain't doing it.
Iran's going to have to make a decision about that. But, and it's not that's real power that they have that, people are going to have to decide about. But, they're not going to intimidate Russia. They're not going to intimidate China. And, the BRICS alliance is going to be and is already a formidable economic alliance. It's not a military alliance. We shouldn't expect it to act as a military alliance. But ultimately, that will have reverberations in terms of military alliances that will be created out of that, But on the side of it, to some extent, as a kind of sequel.
I think the SCO, I think the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is more likely to lean towards military alliance than the BRICS, because Brazil and India, there's big question marks there, where the SCO is more local, it's more neighborhood, and as they say, you can pick your allies, but you can't pick your neighbors.
Yeah, and look, even China, South Korea, and Japan are getting together economically in order to deal with issues in the Western Pacific that really they know. We can't be putting ourselves under the thumb of the United States in this. We are the neighbors, as you say. These are the people we live with, and we have to have a real serious relationship with them. But that's something that's very threatening to the United States, and will have consequences in military endeavors. So anyway, it's a world that is escaping the control of the American imperialist order that existed post World War II. It's very bad. It's also, the other negative element of this, which Iran is running into, and we've all seen, is that all of the institutions of this, the IAEA, the OPCW, the ICC, ICJ, all of these international institutions that were supposed to be objective, neutral, the UN, these things are failing. They've lost all confidence and all trust. They clearly do not ever act in a way that's going to stop the American and Israeli aggressions. And you can't trust them. And you certainly can't trust negotiation with the United States now. They're killing everybody to negotiate with. And so you're in this situation where all that world order is dissolving, and it's a very, very dangerous situation.
Well, two things, I think. Number one, the fact that, like the IAEA and some of these other organizations, the ICC, the desperation of the U.S., they've been using these things, with you remember the so-called Syrian weapons of mass destruction. The IAEA sent a team in, they came back and said, looks like a setup to me. OPCW, looks like a setup. And they said, we better change these people and put in some people that'll write a different report, right?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people in the world that knew that these were compromised organizations, but now the desperation of the United States, they can't afford even to hide it anymore. They got to just come out and do anything they can out of desperation. I think one of the things that is fairly obvious to me, you said, for instance, Japan, South Korea, China, some of these countries are saying, yeah, we can't starve. We got to eat, we got to find a way to feed our people and to survive. As it becomes more obvious that the U.S. is getting weaker, these so-called allies, I think, drift away. Look, they're not hugging the United States because they love them. Oh boy, the U.S. is just wonderful. We're hugging. We love them. Let's go hug the United States. There's something in it for me. They're very powerful. They can push people around. Hey, I get something out of the deal. As the United States gets weaker and it can't push people around and they don't get anything out of the deal, it's like, and we all know the type. I knew a guy. I hate to always tell these stories, but I knew a guy who made a lot of money, big house, big boat, young girl, young wife, in fact. Well, let's just go like this. The business went, the house went, the boat went, and the young wife went along with all of those things, right? When all of that stuff went, certainly they didn't get along anymore. She went on about a bit away, right? Okay. Bottom line is this. That's the way the world works. So you're the big country, you got the big money and the big power. All of these countries are going to hang around you. You're putting money in their pocket. They can call somebody, hey, Uncle Sam's my buddy. Oh, okay, here, let's make a deal, right? Once you got nothing to offer anymore, a lot of these countries are going to say, Russia they're like younger and more handsome. And look over there, now she's looking at China's young and handsome. You're old Uncle Sam, you had it, you got a pot belly, you ain't what you used to be. They're moving on to the young guy. And I think that's a great analogy wherein they're young, uppercoming, and tough and virile. And some of these countries they weren't allied for the United States because they love the color of our flag. It was WIIFM.
I love that freedom.
Yeah, here we go. It's WIIFM, right? What's in it for me? I think that and let's go back to where we start. When they see Russia kick the hell out of the United States and throw them out of Ukraine, you can't defend me if I get in a war. Look at Iran. You screw with Iran, they snubbed your nose and shoved you away. You can't defend me. You can't push people around. Nobody trusts you. Nobody respects you. Look at Israel. You're committing genocides. People don't even want to buy your stuff or anything. I think I'll go over here and make friends with Russia and China where I can make money. Our so-called allies, a lot of them are going to walk away simply because everybody's in it. They're looking out for numero uno. What do you think?
Well, I just couldn't stop thinking about the great scene in Scarface, where Stephen Bauer is going up to all the girls, and Al Pacino says, no, that's not the way you get women. He goes, how do I get women? He goes, first you get the money. You get the money, you get the power. You get the power, you get the women. And that's one of the great scenes. And so that's, and to a certain extent, that is what's going on here. Look, and the United States is demonstrating to the world with all this tariff business how weak it is economically. And, so we have to try and gin up some kind of new economic order in which we can get some benefit from it by having all these ridiculous tariff. And everybody else in the world is going, this isn't the way we want to, this is like some douchebag guy who goes around trying to, get women by showing off how whatever, and he's going, no, we're not interested in this. We're interested in having good relations with people. And, and clearly you're showing me not your power. You're showing me how weak you are with all this crap. And so that's what's happening fundamentally in the world, and it is what's happening. And it's hard to know where it's going to go, because the other side of the coin is not that organized yet either. You know what I mean? The Russians and the Chinese, okay, they're strong, but and they don't have a unified vision of, well, this is what we want to do. And they don't want to run the world as a kind of a conglomerate. So it's confusing. And we're in a phase of change where the old order is being broken up, and we don't know what the new order is going to look like. But the American system is, it's a disaster. It's a disaster for Americans. This goddamn bill that they just passed is going to destroy even further the social economy of the country. And people don't even know it. They don't realize it. I mean, what we're living through is on every level, on international and a domestic level, the fundamental political vapidity of the American political culture look at that. He doesn't understand what he's doing. He doesn't understand the consequences of it. And the people who are voting don't understand. And it's very hard for them to understand, because they're educated, they're miseducated deliberately by the media. So they don't understand what's going on in the world or within their own communities. And it's very dangerous. All I can say is it's very dangerous. I don't know what to say about it, but NATO certainly is one of these institutions that has kind of, pumped itself up, overinflated itself with all of these new countries, because it presumes that it will be the strongest force in the world. It presumed that because of American backing, it can't really ever break up, and blah, 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 blah. And none of that is true anymore. So I don't know where we're going from here. It's economically and militarily and geopolitically, everything is breaking up, and where it's going to end up, I'm not sure. But there are going to be, and there are already, a lot of very, very bad, destructive consequences. First, number one of which right now is Gaza. Number one for 4 years has been Ukraine. This is disastrous. This is a horrible situation. 1 million people probably have been killed in Ukraine, most of them Ukrainians. And there's going to be more conflict like that. And so we have to try and clarify things as much as possible, be open-minded skepticism about what everybody's doing in the world, but, reject clearly these nonsensical, foolish, self-destructive, aggressive actions. The United States cannot rule the world anymore. And to try to do it with these stupid military actions or these stupid economic offensives that really, what are you talking about? You're not going to intimidate China with tariffs. This is nonsense. But we have a country which has become a financialized economy, and it not a productive economy, and that's the fundamental destruction of the society there. So I don't know what we're going to do, and it's very depressing to see it happening. And I'm and you see, I mean, I just saw this. It's a little beside the point here, but it's not actually. I mean, and I'm not necessarily the greatest fan of his, but Mamdani just got the final results of the New York City Democratic vote. He won 56 to 44%. He won over Andrew Cuomo on an anti-Zionist Muslim over the scion of a Democratic royalty, New York royalty political family in the most a Zionist polity in the world outside of Israel by 12%, because he said some very simple things. The rent's too damn high. We got to be able to afford food. We got to be able to afford housing, and we got to be able to get around. The city.
I think the Israel part was a big part of it.
It was a big part.
I think that was a huge. I think there was a lot of
Democrats tried to make it as if, he won even though he was a socialist. He won even though he was anti-Zionist. No. He won because of that. People who never voted, who didn't come out to vote, came out to vote. That's the only future. So what I'm saying is, there are, because of the dissolution of all of these things on the international and domestic level, there are the possibilities of real change. It requires us to keep yapping and trying to clarify things for people. But they're going to come out against this. They're going to try and crush everything. And I don't know how they're going to do it. They're failing on the international level with Russia and China. Russia and China are ascendant. They're going to continue to ascend. And the European countries have to understand that if they don't get in to a mutually beneficial relationship with the ascendance of those new Eurasian powers and Asian powers, essentially, and try to battle them as poodle dogs of the United States, as they have been doing for the past 70 years, they're going to get crushed too. And the Americans, are big dogs, but they're emaciated dogs.
Well, let me ask you something different, and I think it's related, but it's not. Okay, it's related in an indirect way, and it has to do with a major issue, I think, in Europe, and that is the ruling elite is at war with the people, right? At war with the people. Literally, they're like the people in a particular country all say, "Hey, we want Garland." They'll say, "Nope, can't have him." And we're going to arrest him and charge him with some, and now he can no longer, the party, well, we're just going to take this party and we're going to outlaw the party. You can't have them. It's a complete and total thwarting democracy. And to me, something that put an exclamation mark on it, right? In Europe, and I think it's all related, and this is related to the people versus the ruling elite. So the ruling elite in Europe, if you say boo about Zionism, you're going to jail, Richard Medhurst, you're locked up, you can't come to our country, whatever the case may be, right? So there's some, I think I'd never heard of, Bob Villain, right? But, I understand. When I was younger, there was groups and older people said, what do you listen to that craziness for? Whatever, you know what I mean? But now there's Bob Villain, he's yelling and somebody's slamming I listened to was watching him on there and he's just like yelling something crazy and somebody just on a guitar, right? And I'm like, okay, I guess that's what the young people like, right? This guy's screaming, death, death to the IDF. Thousands, tens of thousands of young people. They're screaming. They got Palestinian signs. Yeah, death to the IDF. Death. And so they're all screaming. He's screaming. And he becomes an international hero. Absolutely. Immediately. Some old lady's holding up a phone and millions of people are watching. This is unbelievable. Now, what happens? U.S. empire. He can't come here anymore. And I knew that. They could not allow this guy to come to the United States. Why? I would have went. If he had a concert in D.C., I would have went with the Palestinian flag. I'm telling you that I would have certainly did it, right?
Yep.
He would have put Michael Jackson and Prince and Madonna to shame. Yep. I believe that. If this guy came to the U.S., D.C. area, forget Madonna and all of these record-setting concerts. This guy would have never seen anything like it. And they'd have all been chanting death to the IDF. So they had to stop this. And to me, and they're like, can you believe this? As though he was an individual doing, not there was tens of thousands of people screaming. He was the only one bad guy doing something that's unacceptable. Your thoughts on that dynamic regarding all of this, because it demonstrates something. The ruling elite are at war. They're not at odds. They're at war with them. Your thoughts on the Bob Villain thing?
Oh, the Bob Villain was wonderful. I mean, it was a spectacular thing to watch. A sea of Palestinian flags. As you say, it wasn't him. He was expressing the fury of the crowd, of the people, tens of thousands of people, overwhelmingly. People despise Israel and despise the United States for what they're doing, and rightfully so in Gaza. And the IDF should be defeated. We should all be rooting for the defeat of the IDF in their project to expel and exterminate the Palestinian people. Every person of conscience in the world, has any humanity, should be rooting for the defeat of the IDF. It's just like saying death to the Wehrmacht in World War II. So this is, and as you say, the governments and the people are completely at odds with each other over this. I don't think there's a country in the world, in Western Europe and the United States, and the United States is the closest it might be, where certainly the younger generation, but most of the people are opposed to what they're doing in Gaza and what the Israelis are doing. And they've learned, as I said, this was a year ago, this is the beginning of an anti-Zionist, not just we criticize Israel for this and that, but an anti-Zionist movement per se. We recognize Zionism as colonialism and racism, and we oppose it. It's apartheid. It doesn't have the right to defend itself or to exist. And that's something that's new on the Western horizon. And it's something that's a wave. And as you say, they can't they have to try and crush it because they have no argument against it anymore. There's no argument against it. There's no denying it's racist colonialism, period. The Palestinians are nothing but insects for these people, for the Zionists. And they want to do nothing but kill them and expel them. And the Americans and anybody who supports Zionism is supporting that, and they can't deny it. So you have people now, and the younger people especially, are expressing this, and it's outrage. But this mirrors on other levels. People are fed up with this social economy. They don't know how to express it in the same way. And they don't have the same, and they thought they expressed it through Donald Trump. That's the horror of American politics. Oh my God, Donald Trump's in favor of the working class. Donald Trump doesn't give one shit about the working class. He doesn't give any more of a shit about the working class than he does about the Palestinian people. And this goddamn bill they just passed is pissing all over you. And if you think it's rain, you're a fool. And everybody has, but the Democrats did that. The Democrats for 8 years. Oh, we know how to run. We don't want to hear what the people have to say. That's populism. They're the deplorables. Blah 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 blah. So Trump and the Republicans have played that for all it's worth. You are being screwed. They don't give a damn about you. The Democrats, the Republican, Biden, Trump. They don't give one shit about you. They just want you out of the way so that they can keep all their billions. What? Maybe we should forego the tax cuts to people making more than $1 billion? No. That's what's important. You can't have your Medicaid. You can't have your SNAP. What are you talking about? So this is the situation we're in. People don't start realizing this in the United States. We are screwed, and we are screwed until and unless people start realizing this. And it can be no bullshit about this anymore, you know. And the Democrats giving no alternative to this, and except someone like Zoran does pose an alternative to it. That's why they're going to try and crush it. No, vote blue no matter who, if the blue is Zoran. So anyway, but you know, this is the discrepancy between the ruling elites and the people. That's why populism is such a threat, and the liberals have to pose populism is fascism in some way, and we got to prevent. You know, everybody's a fascist and a racist and a sexist. And now the reactionary ruling class is going to help. Oh, populism was terrorists. They're stupid Hamas supporters. You know, they're Islamists. They want to kill all the Jews. This is all baloney. And if people don't wake up to this and start making alliances where, you know, people are supporting your class interests, your ability to pay the rent, have health care, have food, have a place to live, you know, and get an education. We're not lying around that and rejecting and spitting and the people who want nothing but to enrich themselves infinitely and support every aggression, every horrible Holocaust that the Israelis want to do on the Palestinians. If that's your game, then you're a fool. I mean, unless you're a billionaire or Israeli.
You know, that one of the things I think that I always, one of the things I do is I do searches, right? I do searches because they tell me a lot, because I know the searches are manipulated. You know, when what's her name? Candace Owens went on Piers Morgan and, you know, peeled him a new one over Israel, right? It was great. So I said, let me search Candace, what's her name, and Piers Morgan, Israel. I did a search on Google and it came back, Candace Morgan says something about Trump. It came Candace Morgan, Trump, Candace Morgan, Trump. Nothing about what she said about Israel and Piers Morgan, right? It was obvious. Yeah. So just now I said, okay, France and Macron, let me do a search, right? So I searched the word Putin. Macron, Putin discuss Iran, Ukraine. Macron and Putin discuss Iran and Ukraine. Francis Macron. When you look, it's everywhere. What that tells me is this, that this is blessed by the system. You know what I mean? They're not avoiding it. It's all over. Oh, they're talking. Hey, they're discussing. Oh, well, that blah, blah. Now, 6 months ago, it would have been Macron, a backstabbing Putin lover, is, you know, talking to the evil whatever, right? Now it's, listen to this. On and on. Macron urges Putin to cease fire in Ukraine in first call. Putin and Macron discuss Iran, Ukraine in first call. Putin, Macron hold first call since 2022. Discuss wars in Ukraine, Middle East. Kiev independent. So what you see is this. They're just starting to report on it, that it's happening, but they're doing it in a very neutral manner, right? And it's always telling when you do. You can see they're not attacking it. They're not saying it's wrong. This is blessed by the system. I think in the same way, well, come on, let's not pretend they're stupid. They may be diabolical and evil, but let's not ever misunderstand, as George Bush would say, misunderestimate these people. They're not stupid. I think they know what we know. We're screwed. We can't do. They just took all of Lugansk. We're going to lose all of this. We got to start talking with Putin. I think they're looking for an exit. They're looking for a way. And here's what else they know. We're giving everything to Israel. We have nothing to give to Ukraine. Ukraine, their air defense is just about out, and they got nothing to give them. And Trump kind of said, well, they want some of that, but we got to give them to Israel. And I think that particularly the Europeans, there's no way Macron called just out of his own, I'm just sitting around here eating a friggin' baguette and thought to myself, I'll call Putin. No, hell no. They are talking together and it's okay. Macron, you used to talk to Putin. You give him a call. I think they're plotting. They're looking for an exit some kind of way. But they can't find it. They can't find it for this reason. They wanted, as was said about, as I'll never forget, Al Sharpton, for all my issues with him, he said something valid about Iraq. And they said, how do we get out of Iraq and keep our dignity? He says, we can't. We lost our dignity when we went in.
That's exactly.
How do they get out of here and maintain their respect and dignity and keep NATO together? Hell no, they lost NATO when they went in. And now they're looking for some kind of a deal. Putin's thinking, the last person that struck a deal with you, you killed him.
Yep.
This person you talked to, the whole time he talked to you, you were plotting to stick a shiv in his back like he was in prison the whole time. Putin ain't talking a deal with these people. He'll talk with them. He ain't making no deals. The Russians know what they got to do. These people only understand force. The only thing the Israelis understood in the U.S. empire, when Iran pounded the hell out of them with missiles, that, as they say, put the fear of God in them when they got pounded with missiles so bad that they to this day have to hide the damage. So I think Russia knows I got to continue with this till they get to the point where they come to me and say, how do we get out of this? We got to take a deal. What do you think about this about all this?
Well, again, Macron, I'm not sure what to make of this particular thing, Macron, but I think you're right that there are going to be, and the Europeans someone in Europe has to, and there are forces in Europe that say that, Fico and those people, we have to make a deal with Russia. We're losing. We can't deny it anymore. They're at the end of their rope of denial about the fact that they're losing and they're going to lose and they can't reverse that. So there are going to be some leaders and some factions that try to make a deal with Russia. And you have Trump, who in some respects is on that page anyway, or half on that page, or we don't know. I got to say one thing. Trump is stupid. I do not. I will make an exception to that. I don't think we should treat the regime as stupid, generally speaking. But Trump does not understand what he's doing. And he thinks in a very simplistic way and in a very narcissistic way that really is fundamentally, not that he's demented or incapable of thinking, but that it's a fundamentally stupid way of looking at the world. And it's inconsistent. So anyway, I'll just say that. But so Trump, we don't know about, and nobody knows. But so that's why the European leaders are going to have to try and go to Putin and say, But as you say, why should Putin give him anything? The only negotiations that are going to take place in this situation and in the Iranian situation, I would say, but let's keep on the Ukrainian situation. I've said this from day one, from the day before the invasion, from the day that the Russians recognized the independent states of the Donetsk and Lugansk Republic. It's the end of NATO. This is going one place, and it's going to a military battle in which will end with the only negotiations are going to be negotiations over terms of surrender by one party or another. And the answer has been given. It's not going to be the Russians who are negotiating, who are going to have to accept terms of surrender. It's going to be the Ukrainian, Euro, NATO side that is going to have to accept terms of surrender. That's what it's, you call it whatever else you want. That's what it is. And the Europeans who are smart, people like, well, they'll try and get the best terms of surrender they can and try and, if they're really smart and really capable and maybe they can fool the Russians for a bit, they'll get terms that are less onerous to them and less insulting to them than they deserve. But, or then they've been able to.
I think them days are over. And basically
so
my
this is what's going to happen. You're going to have more divisions that are going to show up in the quote unquote Western camp as about what to do about the end game with Ukraine.
Well, here's what I say. We'll get towards the end, but I'll say this in my dealings with the Russians, which I have many. I think they came to the obvious conclusion, and that is, look, this is an existential war for us, and we're going to treat it like that. We got to win. We ain't going to make a deal. We ain't going to bargain our way out of it. This will be this. There's only one option for us, and that is victory. Whether victory comes by you saying, you won, where do I sign? Whether victory comes by us taking what we have to take on the battlefield, whatever the case may be. So the days when the Russians would have struck some kind of a deal that would have let the NATO countries escape with some manner of respectability are over. That's over. They've done the Crocus City Hall attack. They've attacked their nuclear bomb. All of that. They've lied, cheated, and stealed to them. They just blew up a tanker the other day off the coast of Libya. One thing after the other. Oh, we're going to a dirty war against Russia. Russia will accept. And one of the things they're going to have to say is this: there's going to be no terrorist attacks, all that dirty war. Now, of course, you don't trust them, but they're going to have to. But so the bottom line is this: I think Russia's in a position to not to make a bargain, but to do things that they can materially enforce. You know what I mean? Not something that they have to count on NATO to do, but because I think the only thing they count on NATO to do is lie and steal and cheat. Yeah, and they are pretty damn good at that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a real problem because whatever the terms of the final deal are, it's going to have to be something that Russia is going to say, we are confident that we can enforce this deal. And there's no more confidence in international institutions. They're going to want to bring it to the UN and have the UN Security Council that they may be able to, if there's a deal, they would be able to get a Security Council ratification of the deal. But still, at the end of the day, that's not going to enforce it. What's going to enforce it is their own power.
And remember, if it's a Security Council deal, it's still going to be Russia's deal because Russia has veto power in the Security Council. So you don't fool. A Security Council deal is just icing on the cake, but Russia has to say yes to whatever it is because they can veto it. And China.
Well, also now we've seen, and they've seen that the fact that the Security Council is a security, it doesn't mean the Americans won't ignore it. And at the end of the day, so you have to be willing. Russia has to be willing. Or some other, maybe in conjunction with another. We're
North Korean troops. Yeah, North Korean. I suspect at some point that's what you see. We'll bring in troops from somewhere else. Gee, I wonder if the North Koreans will come. Kim Jong-un will be jumping up and down to send his troops in there. And I do suspect that all of this includes that at some point the Russians are going to say, whatever we have, blah, 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 we're going to bring in foreign troops. North Korean troops. There may be Chinese troops, maybe some Iranian troops. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Malaysian, Pakistani, whatever.
So they're allies. They're going to say, we'll have troops that are our allies. So in the end, doesn't it seem to be that the only choice for NATO is complete capitulation, humiliation, and ultimately the end. I'll put it like this. If you get your ass kicked in your own backyard, you can't very well say, let's go over and stand up to China. Oh, we've got to expand. You know what I mean? You can't even
the ludicrous lunacy about how they can defeat China over Taiwan is just absurd. I mean, but people do not understand the level at which China has outstripped the United States in so many ways. And Taiwan is a province of China. China wants to take over Taiwan. They're going to do it. The United States cannot stop. The only thing to do is blow a bunch of crap up, which they can do, and make it hard for everybody. But they will be humiliated at the end. But that's what is de facto. It's already a humiliation for NATO in Ukraine, and it's the end result.
And Iran, really, and Iran.
No, Iran's not over yet.
No, but I mean, I'm saying right now.
Oh, they failed in what they wanted to do last week.
Let me tell you something. I'll say this: don't underestimate this reality. Israel's position was, we dominate the region. We have escalatory dominance in our region, and part of that was this: all Jews should come here, where you're safe. And all these crazy Arabs and Muslims around us hate us, and they all want to kill us, but you're safe here because we have escalatory dominance and we can squash any of them like a flea. Well, it ain't safe here. Now, they don't all want to kill you, but a lot of them do now that you've committed a genocide. You kind of created that, but you can't protect them. So you're saying to Jewish people all over the world, come here where it's safe. Oh, great. Can you protect me? Unless Iran gets really pissed off, then they throw out missiles, can probably get blown down. But we'll do a good job of hiding it. Nobody will really know. So now the under the supporting philosophy of Israel was beat to hell and had holes poked in it by Iranian missiles. To me, the end of the Israeli project is in sight. I don't see how they can support these damn people. Ain't coming back from New Jersey.
I think you're absolutely right. That is the fundamental aspect. That is a fundamental, one or two fundamental aspects. The other one being the support of the United States of America. But the idea that Israel is a safe haven for Jews. It's like the safe house, the safe room for Jews in the world. And once Jews don't emigrate to Israel to be under fire. They emigrate to Israel to live a life of colonial mastery and be kind of safe and secure and have their coffee shops and their entrepreneurial businesses, etc. If they can't do that with peace and security, why go there? Why bother? You can really have it. You do and have an. You're not being killed in New York, and you're not being killed in Paris. So live your life with the rest of the people like everybody else in the world. So that's a fundamental thing, and that changing, it's good. In fact, Israelis are going and buying land in Cyprus now. They're buying up Cyprus to get as an escape valve. So that's a really important thing. But that's why Netanyahu, that's why the Zionist elite in Israel is going to make every effort, because Iran is really the only, besides Yemen, but Yemen isn't powerful enough, but Iran is the only nation left powerful enough to hurt Israel in that way. And they know that. The Israelis know that. They know Iran isn't weak. They're not attacking Iran because it's weak. It's at a weak point now because it's lost a lot of the axis of resistance. Hezbollah is obviously been damaged and weakened. So it's at a weak point now. But Israel knows that Iran is stronger than it and therefore has to attack it and try to destroy that and put an end to it quickly before it gets stronger. And that's why it's going to. And Iran is going to have to decide whether it's fighting to victory or whether it's going to compromise in order to avoid getting blown the shit up, because it's going to
compromise ain't happening. Well, the other thing, one more thing that Jim, since we have a lot of time, but this is the last thing. The other part of it is this: Israel, we have escalatory dominance and we can dominate anybody. So they start screwing with Iran, and Iran's beating the hell out of them. And what do they say? We got one more card to play, everybody. So don't you worry about it. This is a safe haven for the Jews. The Americans will come in. We can beat the hell out of anybody. And if we don't, Uncle Sam will come bail us out. Uncle Sam comes in, and Iran says, we're going to shut down the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah. And all of these rich people say, Trump, you know what derivatives are? You know what oil futures are? You know what's going to happen to the speculators if they close down Wall Street? Our economy's weak. If it takes this kind of punch, even if they open it back up in 2 weeks,
and if the United States and Israel are threatened to such an extent that they're about to lose, they will use nuclear weapons. They will say to Iran.
Well, here's my point. No, my point was
they won't even say that they'll bomb Qom and they'll bomb Tehran or they'll bomb another city. So you want to keep going?
But here's my point.
That's going to be the what's Iran's answer to that going to be? What's Iran's answer? What's Iran's answer?
Here's my point to what's happening.
I don't know
what's going to happen. Here's my point. When the U.S. brought all of this stuff around and everything, B2, 3, 4, 5 bomb, everything and surrounded, and okay, Israel's getting pummeled. Okay, Uncle Sam, come get him. Uncle Sam comes in, and Iran says, you know, we're probably going to close the Straits of Hormuz. And Uncle Sam went,
Well, yeah, but
it gave them pause, and they
paused. They paused.
I'm just saying where we are right now.
Yes. We're in a pause.
We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can speculate, but where we are right now, it was clear to me that the closing the Straits of Hormuz gave Uncle Sam pause.
It's absolutely. Iranians have a lot of power. That's one of the main.
So what is going to happen? I'm not sure.
That's one of the main levers of power they have. They have it. The Americans and Israelis are afraid of it. Absolutely. I am just saying this is not any other situation. The Americans are more likely to use and the Israelis certainly have nuclear weapons and will use them. It's not, and there's nobody else in Ukraine who can use nuclear weapons besides the United States. And it's less likely that they'll use nuclear weapons in Ukraine than Israel. But I do not think, given all that power, we can close the Straits of Hormuz. We can do that. If it comes to a choice where the United States and Israel, their project is about to be defeated, they are in a position, okay, we give up. We will let you, Iran, keep your nuclear enrichment program. Keep all your, that's not what they, keep all your missiles. We'll let you be a strong, independent regional power that supports the Palestinian cause. We give up. Or, no, in order not to give up, we have to make Iran bend the knee. And the only way we can do that, nuke them. They will nuke them. And
well, that
Iran
is the
has
question.
To decide how it's going to react to that. The Americans and Israelis have to decide how they're going to react to you. We'll close the Straits of Hormuz. They do. And they will decide. And I'm saying, I think they will decide by saying, you do that, we're going to nuke you. And they will nuke them in advance. They shall, you want to keep going? So that's, talk to me. I'm Netanyahu. I'm whoever the fuck the president is, because he's going to do what Netanyahu wants. We just nuked your city. What, you want to keep going?
Now, I'll say
then
this.
The Iranians are going to have to decide what they're going to do about that. And I cannot say with any certainty what they will do about that.
Well, I'll say this. I don't think they'll nuke them. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not saying they won't. I'll believe it when I see it because Witkoff gave away the game, and I believe him. And I believe for a number of reasons he's right. He said, well, if a nuke goes off anywhere on this earth, the markets will collapse. And he's right. Collapse. And of course, you throw a nuke in Iran. Okay, boom, fallout. Which way is it going to go? Is it going to go to Pakistan? Is it going to go towards the Gulf and drop over all the oil fields? And now the oil fields are unusable. They're just completely Chernobyl all over, the oil everywhere, and the Western economy collapses. And you say, the good news is we made the Iranians collapse. The bad news is we pray that we can get back to 1929 because it's so much worse right now than it was in 1929. Oh, by the way, what are all of these damn torches starting and guillotines? Right. So what they'd have to say is this. They would have to say is this. We have decided to end the American project right now. Doggone it. We're going to end the American project. We are going to end the U.S. empire. We're going to go into dire poverty, absolute what's the word?
Did they foresee the consequences? Did they foresee the consequences of what was happening in Iran? What they did in Ukraine? Did they foresee those consequences? And the people who are doing this, the Israelis, don't care. I'm
talking about the Israelis.
I know, but I am.
US.
But
then we get back to
have the capability and will, whatever the United States wants them to do, they will hit. If they feel that they're threatened and they're at the door of defeat, what they will do, they won't care about any of that. They will nuke Iran in order to avoid what they consider the defeat of the Zionist project, the limitation of the Zionist project.
I think it's already been defeated. I think it's done. My opinion is there is no way
it will be done. I'm not saying that will save. I don't think it will save. It won't save the Zionist project. But that's the Samson option that they're talking about. If we go down, everybody goes with us. They do that. They believe that.
I don't believe it. I think that the Zionist, the infamous Samson option is the old crazy man theory. I can't control these people over here. So whatever you do, don't upset Israel too much because I can't control them. They're out of my control. They'll kill us all. I don't believe it. Oh, I'm supposed to believe. According to the Samson option, they've got like all the cities in Ohio. They're up, and I'm supposed to believe that the United States is just going to say, fine. They're targeting Ohio. They're targeting American cities. They're targeting. I don't. Oh, now, I'm not saying that I'm 100% wrong. Here's what I'm saying. I don't believe that they're going to do that. I don't believe that they're going to commit, because with all of these things, here's what you're talking about time and again, whether it's Ukraine or whatever the case may be, you've got to believe that these billionaires are going to commit economic suicide. And in many instances, physical suicide. That people who are riding around in 300-400-foot yachts in the Maldives, doing all kinds of whatever they want to do all over the world. The world is their playground. All of this is fantastic. They're just going to throw that to hell. You know what? Let's just drop that. Let's all die in some ungodly nuclear, or we'll just live in a underground where we can't come out until we die eventually of, our air's filters go up in the, whatchamacallit. You have to believe that they'll throw in the towel and just say, out of hell with it. I'm committing suicide. I'm not saying that they won't. But I'm saying I don't think they will. But that becomes a philosophical question that can't be answered until such time as we get there, can we? But we can all see the direction we're going. The direction we're going is this
situation.
Yeah, I'll finish by saying, here's the direction we're going. Empires have fallen before. What happens when an empire falls with nukes? Can an empire that has nukes fall? Now, not collapse voluntarily like the Soviet Union, fall, struggling and fighting and doing everything it can not to fall. Can they fall without the nukes being used? I think that's the question, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, well, that's first. It's going to come up in Ukraine, absolutely. And I think, unlike what I said a couple of years ago, I think it's less likely now that they'll use nuclear weapons to try and stave off defeat in Ukraine. So that's good. But that is the question. The question is, to what extent will a powerful country, a powerful empire, as you say, with nuclear weapons, accept defeat without using those weapons to stave it off?
Even China, same thing. They're going against Russia. Okay, you lost. That was done. We use nukes. You're going against Israel. I mean, Iran. Iran now, because of the changes technology, is powerful to knock the hell out of you. And if you go in there, in their region, they can knock the hell out of you. And they can cut your oil off, and they can hurt you so bad that you ain't an empire anymore. Will you accept that pain without? And these lunatics, oh, we're going to do this over Taiwan. You're going to get your ass kicked so fast over Taiwan that you won't even know what happened. Now, what happens then? Do you start throwing nukes at China? Who'll throw nukes back at you?
But they are afraid of China, and they're afraid of Russia because they have nukes. Because they know they will get nuked back. Okay, they can hit around with it. Iran's not going to nuke them back, and they think, and a lot of people think, a country that's getting nuked and can't nuke back is going to surrender.
Yeah, well, Alistair Crook talked about that. Now, Alistair Crook has said that no, Iran will. I mean, he said Israel won't nuke Iran, and this is what Alistair Crook said. I listened to him. He said, here's the reason. He said, in the mountains of Iran, all over the place, they got these bases. They're their dead hand bases, and they got hundreds of thousands of missiles in those bases. And they have instructions that if it's ever decapitation, they're to throw those missiles nonstop until they run out, which could take 6 months or a year. The nonstop, just keep throwing missiles all over Israel, wipe out Israel, hit Israel's their nuclear power plant, which is going to turn a huge section of Israel basically into Chernobyl when that gets hit with a couple of hundred, you know what I mean? Their job, and that Israel won't, because Israel knows it. Israel knows that's the end of Israel if they do it. So who the hell? Well,
I guess that's true.
I guess that's why
that exists, and Israel knows it, and it will work. And that Israel is convinced that it's true and they're there, that capability is there. And Israel is itself afraid of that so much that it would never nuke. I hope that's all true. I just don't know.
But I think I'm starting to think now they got a deal with Netanyahu to step down and drop the charges against him, and they'll put some other and get rid of, you know, the smoke and put some more compliant puppets in. That you know, but who knows?
Are they going to stop? Are they going to stop? Are they going to withdraw from Gaza and let the people of Gaza live? Are they?
Yeah, well, I'll believe that when I see it too.
Exactly. They're not going to do that unless they're forced to do it.
Yeah. Jim Kavanaugh, tell everybody where they can find you and all your stuff.
Oh, go to my Substack. It's right there on the screen. You can get everything there. I'm on Twitter at the Polemicist, at the Polemicist _. But you find everything on my Substack. Please subscribe. Buy my coffee, whatever, you know. And you can subscribe for free. Everything is posted for free, although paid subscribers get some special access. And enjoy talking to you and always have fun here. I think we managed to yappity and solve all the problems of the world. As we no, it's always fun talking to Garland, and appreciate his audience putting up with me.
All right, everybody, follow Jim Kavanaugh, and of course, follow me on Telegram, Rumble, Rockfin, all that kind of stuff. Okay, we've got Patreon, PayPal, buy me a coffee, that kind of stuff. If you can afford to donate to the channel, if you can't, that's fine. The important thing is that you share this on all your social media platforms. Oh, by the way, I got a P.O. box now, so if you want to send a letter or mail, anything, donation, whatever, to the P.O. box, there it is right there. So for those who do snail mail, feel free to send me a letter. We're out.